we don't do a lot of video game content on this channel, and it's something that I might do from time to time. It's never going to be the focus of what we do, but every so often I'm going to play a new game and finish it in a reasonable amount of time and want to talk about it. And Last of Us Part 2 is kind of a big deal for me personally, because Last of Us 1 was my game of the generation, last generation, and also I think, I mean, I've not done like a top 10 recently, but I think it's in like my top 2 or 3 games of all time. I love Last of Us 1. I typically love Naughty Dog's output. The Uncharted series is also some of my favourite stuff, but Last of Us 2 was kind of this weird entity right from the start, because I didn't know if I even wanted a second one, because The Last of Us 1 ended with such a poignant moment, with such a poignant ending, and it was such a perfect game that felt like it had a complete story, beginning, middle, and end, that I wasn't sure if I actually wanted any more. But then they announced Part 2, they revealed, had that little reveal trailer, and it was hard not to be excited, even with my reservations. And as we built up to the release of it over 4 years since Uncharted 4 came out, and we got these reveals, we got a bit of gameplay here or there, and it looked good, but it never necessarily convinced me why it should exist. And I kind of trusted to an extent that Naughty Dog, that Druckmann would have something to say, would have some sort of story they want to tell that justifies its existence. And it's kind of this goes back to, like, why does any sequel need to exist for the most part? And usually they don't, and that's okay for a lot of things, because it's okay. So we don't need Friday the 13th Part 7, but if you like the Friday the 13th movies, you don't really care about the integrity of them all that much. But Last of Us is such a special, emotional, layered journey that continuing it was always going to be a tall order. It was always going to be something they had to convince me that this needed to happen, that they had an idea that they had to fulfill and do. So with that said, I'm going to review The Last of Us Part 2. Having finished it took me about a week, just over a week. It was about 27 hours of actual in-game time. I never checked the clock, but given what it was at when I started my last section and how long that one was, it was about 27 hours. And I want to talk about it. I'll start spoiler-free, just to give sort of sense. I don't know if anyone cares about spoiler-free necessarily, but I'll start that way, just to sort of package my thoughts into a reasonable order. So, did I like the game? I mean, that's the first thing, I suppose, really. Did I like it? Did I love it? Did I hate it? And there's a very divisive opinion on the internet about this game. Some of it for sort of more understandable technical reasons or game design reasons, and then there's a lot of hate because of the topics that the story decides to go at. A lot of, quite frankly, bigoted viewpoints for a lot of it. So no, I love the game. It's given Naughty Dog's output in the last 10 years, it was very unlikely that I wasn't going to at least really enjoy playing it, because I enjoy their games. I enjoy how they tell their stories. I typically really become attached to their characters. And whereas Uncharted's kind of a feel-good adventure story, which sometimes makes you believe they're in danger, but it's all about being a fun adventure with thrills and excitement and heartwarming moments. Last of Us was always the darker side to it, where it was like, no, we're going to punish you. we're going to make you feel pain. And boy, oh boy, does this game make you feel pain if you do get invested in these characters and you do care about the story. And yeah, your appreciation of it is so tied to the first one as well, that if you come into this game already loving those characters, if you care about Joel and Ellie, and it's not so much that you think Joel and Ellie, Joel especially, is a great person. There's a difference between great person and great character. Joel undeniably does some sketchy things in the first game, but the beauty of the first game, back when I was first kind of talking about that, when I was raving about it in 2013, is that by the time he starts doing bad things, you don't care. You're on his side. You want to do the bad thing with him because you care so much about Ellie and you want to save her and all these things. And Last of Us for me kind of took it one step forward in terms of tying what the game was doing from a gameplay perspective into how the story had made me feel to that point, where the motivations of the character and my motivations of the player were in sync. And I thought that was magical. And Last of Us 2 takes that further. It challenges it. It develops it. It challenges the way you look at your characters. It challenges who you align yourself with. It makes you question if your characters are doing the right or wrong things repeatedly. And I compared this. One of the first things I compared this to was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and not because the first, Rise of the Planet of the Apes and The Last of Us, there's not really any comparison between them, but Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the reason why I compare it to that is the idea that Dawn's very much about showing you both sides of a conflict and showing you how they're destined for kind of this end point, even though you really want them not to. And Last of Us kind of has elements of that, and it has stuff. There's the second half of the game is very surprising if you managed to avoid spoilers. And there was leaks, and I'm sure people, in fact, a lot of the anger for people who are very immaturely angry about a lot of the game, it came from the leaks. They haven't played it themselves for the most part. So the story's moving, it's touching, it's hard hitting. There's moments where you are with your characters and you want them to do the thing and you're hoping they're going to do a certain thing, and there's moments where you feel disgusted by pressing the buttons because you don't want to do what the character's prompting you to do with the icon saying press square, but what you're doing when you press square is something you don't want this character to do. And it's challenging, and it takes the idea of telling a story and then takes certain things that you can only do in a video game that you can't do in a movie, that you can't do in a book or a comic book or anything else, any other type of storytelling. You can only do it in a video game because of the way it's interactive. And it makes you feel guilty about pressing a button. And it makes you really want to press a button. And it takes that. And I feel like so much of what people say about video games in terms of narrative and storytelling is, I feel something that's championed a lot in storytelling in games is something that I think is a little bit overrated, is the idea of multiple choice, is the idea of paths and different endings, and which kind of ties to also the game's length and all that. And I'll maybe talk about that a little bit later, but the idea that, does it not have multiple endings? Does it not choices? Does my playthrough not alter versus someone else's? And I've never really completely understood the appeal of that, to be honest. Mainly because when you design a story that's focused, that's satisfying, it's satisfying because it's been, it works in every single way because it's been thought through back and forth. And once you have to introduce choice into that, you have to, at least on some level, dilute it a little bit to make it work in multiple ways. So I am a champion of a single narrative that is always the same and there is no player choice. And people, I think, sometimes criticize games that are like that because they say, well, then you're not utilizing the fact that it's a game to tell your story. You're not taking advantage of what gaming offers. I disagree. Sometimes that can be true. But in Last of Us 1 and 2, both, no, tying your motivations in and making you feel a certain way, and then making you feel a certain reaction to your own actions in the game, and then making yourself feel guilty or making yourself feel like you have the motivation to kill someone because you're angry, because you care about what's going on, and playing with how the story's making you feel, and then using that to feed back into how you feel about how you play. That is using the narrative to tell your story. That is using the gameplay to tell your story. And it's having them feed back against each other in a way that is basically like an expertise, essentially. And it's baffling to me that this goes unnoticed. This is so much more skillful than a Bethesda game, which gives you 3 choices that essentially don't really mean a whole lot in terms of differences. There's a couple of pre-recorded lines of dialogue that have a difference and maybe a different reward at the end of the quest. This, to me, is far more impressive because it's using its tools. It's in the same way that a movie, over the years, movies have developed their tools and how to tell a story. If you go back and watch a movie from the 30s and 40s, the camera's not doing anything that fancy. It's pretty static. It's just, simple shots and wide shots. And then you go a few decades later and there's steady cams and there's cameras going in and around people. And then you go to these days and you have these movies that are entirely one take, or you have movies that'll use different types of sound effect or visual effects. It's all different tools. It's using the tools to tell your story. And there's a lot of overlap in the tools between games and movies because they're both visual mediums. It makes sense there would be. But games have the interactivity. And I feel like Naughty Dog, and some other developers have done this now too. There's definitely other developers that are kind of catching up here, but they've used the tool of player agency and the interactivity to tell their story, but not in a way, not in the most obvious way possible, which is make a choice and the story changes its path. No. you're doing the story and you feel engaged in what the character is doing and controlling that, reacting to that, and then maybe disagreeing with it or agreeing with it makes you feel more into the story and more a part of it, and more, it's a more layered feeling as well, because when you do feel that you disagree with the character, it's a very complicated feeling. And one of the best things for me that kind of sums up this whole game is towards the end of the game when I was streaming the game, because I streamed the whole thing from start to finish, and one of the things that one of my audience members asked me in the last like 30 minutes of the game when I was playing, I don't want to give any spoilers yet, but someone said, do you want to kill this character? Because what, you know, character A was on a path to character B. Do you want to kill this character? And it was a really hard question because it was complicated. You're on social media and it's like relationship status and it's like yes, no, it's, or single, taken. No, it's complicated. This was complicated because I couldn't actually say that, what I wanted out of the ending. I did ultimately say I didn't want to kill them, but I didn't necessarily want to forgive or want to have some sort of happy ending. And that is such a layered desire when interacting with a story in a way that most things can never even hope to achieve. It's more nuanced. It's not just, good guy, bad guy. I want good guy to win and kill Z bad guy, and that is the end of the story. It's far more to it than that. And I feel like, again, there's some portions of the gaming audience that get really upset when you focus so much on narrative, but certain games are about narrative, and all of the gameplay and everything in the game is a tool to tell the narrative. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a walking simulator. I think anyone who claims that the Naughty Dog games are walking simulators clearly are just being kind of ignorant, or just have some sort of weird agenda against them or something. I don't know. But it's the tools to tell a story, which is very different, because in other games I play, I love Slay the Spire, I love XCOM 2. Those games aren't about telling stories. The story, I mean, there's a bit of a story in XCOM 2, but no one cares. It's not the point of the game. The point of the game is the tactics and the strategy and the addiction of doing all that, and this is wonderful. It's a very different thing, and it's one of the best examples of what it is. Last of Us 2 Part 2 is about telling a story and using the gameplay to engross you in that story. And when you're playing the game, when you're doing the stealth and you're dodging clickers and you're dodging the runners and other human enemies, like, it's all about the atmosphere. It's all about entrenching you in that world and feeling the rush of getting around things. And yeah, so I mean, I would say that, I guess, which I guess is glowing praise up until this point. And most of this is going to be praise. I mean, it's not perfect. I gave the first game a 10. I stand by that. And I the first game, and I would say that the first game is probably closer to my heart than the second one is. Even though I think the second game arguably improves and is more ambitious in what it's doing in a lot of ways. But, the pacing isn't perfect. And it is a very long game for the type of game that it is. It's one of these things that I talked about how, gamers, and, I use gamers just as a sort of blanket term for the online gaming community, but they're kind of the worst at times. And one of the examples is for a long time, anything that was under 10 hours or even under like 15 hours was considered too short. It's like, oh, you want me to pay $60 for something that I can do in 2 or 3 days, which is baffling to me. It always has been. I mean, my favorite video game series is Resident Evil, and most of those can be beat in a couple of hours once you know what you're doing. It was seen like, oh, it has to be at least like 30, 40 hours. It has to be a 60-hour RPG with side quests, and so many games have become padded and bloated because they have to adhere to this idea that a game has to be X long. And that's not to say that I think Last of Us 2 should be much shorter, really, because to be honest, like, I don't necessarily think there's much in it that I would want to take out. It's just a little bit in the long-winded side, but at 27 hours, it's not the worst possible. I think 30 hours is kind of typically where I'd say a game should kind of cap out. There's some exceptions. Witcher 3 was like one of the few games that I, in a single playthrough went to 60 hours on. 30 hours tended to be what the Mass Effect games were for me, which was kind of, some of the RPGs I played last gen. But it is notable that these types of single story game, Last of Us 1 was about 15 hours. This one's about 25 or so hours. Well, the first one was 12 to 15, depending on how you played it. So it's about double the length. It's about double the length of the first one. Which kind of makes sense from a structure point of view when you actually play the game and you see how it's split up into like 2 halves. it's almost like you get 2 full kind of games out of it. But yeah, so maybe something closer to 20 would have been better. Spider-Man, I think the main story was about 20. God of War, the main story, I think was about 20 as well, something in that range. It seems to be 20 to 25 hours seems to be the new standard for these big first-party Sony games. And honestly, all those games are great, and some of them, Spider-Man went in especially quick, I thought. But and I think the reason why Last of Us doesn't feel like it goes in as quick is not because it's any less good. In fact, I'll definitively say I think Last of Us Part 2 is better than Spider-Man, and I love Spider-Man, but it's because it's so emotionally draining that it feels so much more intense, and everything feels like it has weight to it, that it's exhausting at times, where you have to only play a few hours at a time because you get so emotional. You're so many tense situations where your back's against the wall and you're like surrounded by clickers. And the last time I stopped playing it for like a section before I came back and did the last chunk, it was like I dropped into an area that clearly had 5 clickers and like 2 of the bigger dudes, and I was like, you know what, this is a good place to leave it tonight. I don't think I have one more intense like clicker section in me, and that's this was the nature of the game. It's very draining, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. This wants to be a heavy game. This does not want to be a light-hearted pick up and smile game, and that's good. That's okay. You want games of variety. You don't want everything to be the same type of thing. So yes, characters are great. Voice, I mean, all the things that you expect to be good in a Naughty Dog game. The voice acting is wonderful. Characters are so likable, relatable, or even if not likable, at least what's the word I'm looking for? Sympathetic. No, empathetic. They're empathetic. But all that stuff's great. Like the animations are like, ever since Uncharted 1, it felt like Naughty Dog was really trying to like push the envelope. And I remember in Uncharted 1, there's a moment in the submarine with Nathan Drake where he sort of puts his hand at the top of the entrance of the area in the hatch when he's going through the submarine hatch. And I thought, oh, that's really fancy. That looks really good. And they've done nothing but improve that game to game. Like there's so many little animations in this game for every contextual situation that it feels so alive and real and all these things. Gameplay is pretty much just an extension of Last of Us 1, but with lots of improvements. There's a bit more variety. There's also sometimes where you have like some human enemies and like clicker infected enemies at the same time, so you can kind of play them against each other. There's even like multiple factions of human enemies, so sometimes you can play them against each other. The visuals are basically stunning. I'm so impressed that these visuals are coming out of a base PS4. I still have my launch PS4, that's what I'm playing it on. The only complaint I have on that front is that the PS4 is a goddamn airplane when it's going. It sounds like a jet engine, and it is so loud that I have to play the PS4 with headphones. Now I cannot play it without headphones, and they're headphones that cancel a lot of sound out, and I need to play it with those because if I don't, it's just too distracting and annoying. So hopefully that's something the PS5 deals with, because oh boy, it sucks. So no, it's stunning. There's some visually absolutely stunning moments. There's stuff with a lot of fire, about 3/4 through, give or take. That was absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stunning vistas in certain locations where they're looking out in the horizon, whether it be like sort of farmland or snow-covered land or whatever. In fact, there's some wonderful stuff. There's a lot of, because it's most of the game set in Seattle, so there's a lot of rain. There's a big storm at one point throughout the game, and all that stuff looks really good. So I'm into that. So, and I do like the story. I like what the story's trying to do. I like the way it's making me rethink characters, and I think it's at this point where I'm probably going to say spoiler warning and go into the spoilers, because ultimately, there's nothing else to talk about. All the little things I want to talk about. I mean, actually, one more thing I'll talk about before I go to spoilers. There's a great new mechanic in this game that I love in the gameplay. I call it the rope mechanic, or the cable mechanic, where there's various points where there'll be a cable or something. Sometimes you have to plug it into something for power. Sometimes you have to use it as a sort of a rope to like swing on or climb up or whatever. But it's such a cool thing where you'll find like a rope that's like attached to something, but the other end isn't. And you'll actually sort of coil it, like the character, Ellie will coil it and like carry it around, and then you can throw it over things to make like a like a rope to climb, or get it in the right position, or throw it over something so you can connect it to a battery. It's so good. Like, it's such a fun little mechanic that they use probably like, I don't know, a dozen times maybe over the 27 hours that I played. But every time I did it, I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is like a fun little mechanic that I'd like to see introduced into more games that are, like this. Not every type of game, obviously, but, I don't expect Ratchet and Clank, the new Ratchet and Clank, to have this mechanic. But games like this, I feel like it's a really fun idea. So I really like that. That was really cool. So yeah, spoilers then. I'll give you spoilers. Warning for Last of Us Part 2. You have been warned because they are big. So where do I start? Do I start with Joel's death? Do I start with the dual narratives between two characters? I mean, there's so much to. I'm being reminded in chat because I'm streaming this as I record it. There is a new mechanic as well with the movement. There's a prone movement, because you could always crouch in The Last of Us, but now you can actually lie down prone and crawl under cars and stuff, and even shoot people in the feet while you're down there. I like that. That was a good little addition. It's a good little quality of life thing, just to make it feel like there's more levels to it, and not just up and down, up and down. It's no, you can go down a bit, you can go down a lot. You can, if you're running and going to prone, you'd sort of slide into it. It's good. If you get knocked back and you lie on your back and you can shoot while you're lying down, there's all these little things just to make it a bit more nuanced than it was in the first game. But yeah, so the story, the big stuff I want to talk about. So they pulled a trick on us, because they pulled the trick of Joel, because all the marketing heavily implied something. It heavily implied that the motivation for Ellie to go on this rampage, this revenge rampage, was that her girlfriend, who I learned was obviously in the game is called Dina, that she was the one who was going to be killed and something bad was going to happen to her, and that was going to be what inspired Ellie's rampage. And they not only heavily implied that, so that's what everyone felt the plot was going to be, they also actually tricked us with the marketing a little bit, because there's some scenes in trailers where they actually took scenes from later in the game that didn't have Joel in them and put Joel in them instead. There's a particular moment with Jesse where Jesse shows up and says, I wasn't going to let you do this on your own. They actually did a cheat and put Joel in that scene instead, with Troy Baker doing the line, I wasn't going to let you do this on your own, to make us think that there was going to be more Joel later and in the game. And there's been some controversy there. Some people feel like it's false advertising, and I disagree with that. I feel like when it comes to a narrative thing like this, when it comes to a story like this, I am actually A-okay with them tricking us. I actually think, in the interest of keeping the story a secret, especially when it's not the first of something, when it's a sequel, or it's, because but did people complain when Infinity War came out and there was scenes in the trailer where Hulk was there, but in the movie it's actually Bruce Banner in the Iron Man Hulkbuster armor? But were people complaining about that? It's fine. They wanted to save a story detail that they were keeping secretive on. And so much of this game, I respect how much Naughty Dog care about the spoilers and care about keeping things on the down low, because everything in this game, when I got to the second half, when I got to the Abby playable, obviously there's a little bit at the start where you play as Abby, but when I got to the real sort of Abby playable section, and it came up saying Seattle Day 1 again, and it paused before it said it, because it came up saying Seattle, and you think it's going to say Day 4, but it doesn't. It says Day 1, and it pauses just an extra amount of time before it says Day 1 again. And when I started controlling Abby, and I pressed the menu button and realized, wait, she's got her own skill tree. She has her own weapons. She has her own things to upgrade. Holy shit, I'm going to be playing as her for the same amount of time I was as Ellie, basically. I'm going to be playing as her for the 3 Seattle days. When I realized that, it was like a bombshell. It felt like a huge deal, and it was a conflicted deal, because when you learn it at that point in the game, it's like, oh shit, first of all, I now see why this game's lasting as long as it is, because it felt like I was wrapping up as Ellie. It felt like I was getting near the end to a point. And then it was like, no, you're halfway. Here's the other side of this that you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing all of her stuff in the same time period. And she also gets flashbacks, much like Ellie. I'll talk about those in a minute. But that blew my mind. And it is this wonderful thing where Abby's the person who hunted down and brutally murdered Joel. She bashed his face in with a golf club. And I'm going to say something off the bat here. Some of the online vitriol about Abby is absolutely disgusting, and the attitude of some people about this game, about it being too focused on women, and that the one sort of main male character got killed at the start, and people who wanted this to be just a light-hearted adventure with Joel as the main character. Like, come on. And even people complain about how Abby looks, because I have to say this, a lot of the hate for Abby, I bet you it would be at least half of what it is if she was a more conventionally attractive woman, right? And one of the things I like about her actually is that she doesn't look conventional. She looks like a really bulky character. She looks like she's been training, which makes sense from a character point of view. Ever since the death of her father, she has been bulking up. You know, Joel's this legend out in the wasteland, right? Joel's this character who went through hundreds of people getting Ellie across country and killed her father. She has been working out solely for the intention of being able to take Joel on, solely for the intention of being tough enough to make it to him and get through anything that's in her way to get her revenge. It's such a good character beat, and it's such an unconventional type of female character in a game that it's really refreshing. And, like, yeah, you know what? Yes, I'm happy this game has multiple strong female characters. The two leads are two strong female characters, and I'm glad that that's the focus. Not in the sense that I'd rather that over anything else, but we don't get enough of these type of characters in games. It's baffling to me that people have this attitude, this weird. Now, if you hear at this point because she killed Joel, because you care about Joel in a narrative context way, that's something else. And I think at the time when I cut over to Abby, I felt conflicted. I was like, oh man, for as flawed as he was, I really loved Joel as a character. And it's something the first half of the game does really well, that after his death, we have these flashbacks with Ellie, with Joel, where we see them in between the time of the end of the first game and where the second game starts, and we see one of my favourite sections of the game is for her birthday, about a year after the end of the first game, he takes her to the dinosaur museum, and then into the space section of the museum. Not only just because there's tons of Jurassic Park references, which I thought were great, and yeah, she can totally jump off the T-Rex, and you should do it. But that scene where he gives her the recording of the moon, the moon mission, right? And she's like listening. She's in the pod, and she's listening to it, and she's imagining it. It's this beautiful moment, and it's such a great example of Joel trying to be the best father he can be, and I love that. Throughout the game, you don't know until one of the flashbacks, about 2/3 maybe through that first Ellie section, that first half, where you find out that she actually knows. She knows that he lied at the end of the first game. She goes to the hospital, Joel catches up, and they have it out, and he admits to her what the choice was and what he did. And the fact that at that point, so far into Ellie's story, she's we've already been playing as her desperate for revenge, going after these people for what they did to Joel. The fact that she wants all that revenge, even though she knew what he did, just all of a sudden made it far more interesting. It was already good. It was already great and exciting, and you want that revenge and you care. But it does two wonderful things. One, it makes it more layered, because since then she's had a really patchy relationship with him, where she's been kind of having a rough time with Joel, where they've not been in a great place together, and that's been hinted at like all through the game. So it kind of explains that, right? And the fact that she still wants this revenge shows you how much he meant to her anyway, and it's kind of this like, your family's not perfect, but she cares. But it also does this great thing where it aligns her and the audience. It aligns her and the player, because assuming you played the first game, that is, you knew what he did, and you still want to go and get revenge for him. You still care about Joel. So putting her in the same place as the player aligns you, and all of a sudden it makes you and Ellie click together. One of the great things that someone else said that I think is a really wonderful point is that as you're playing through that first half with Ellie, it's really quiet and depressing for a lot of it. Once Dina stays at the theater for extended periods of time and she's not with you anymore, you actually are on your own, unlike most of the first game, where for most of the first game you had Ellie with you as you were Joel. And there's a great thing where it feels so quiet and you're longing for someone to talk to, the same way that Joel and Ellie used to talk to each other. And then you get a taste of it in the flashbacks. It cuts to the museum bit, and you get that taste of them talking to each other. And you realize that you really missed that from the first game, and I think that's super intentional. That Ellie is in such a dark place, and she doesn't have that human connection. It's wonderful stuff. So the point I was getting at though is you cut to Abby. Once Ellie has basically killed all of her friends, the big dark bit happens where she kills Owen and Mel being pregnant. She didn't realize she was pregnant, of course. That's something she finds out afterwards, and it's kind of this moment of horror, like she realizes what she's done. Showing that Ellie does still have some sort of moral compass. She's not completely, lost cause. And Abby comes for them, and it ends in this cliffhanger, and then it goes to Abby's side. We get some of her flashbacks, we get a sense of her father, we get a sense of all these things. And you're conflicted because this is the person who killed Joel. I don't want this. And cynically, at that point, I'm thinking, right, I know what they're doing here. I know what Naughty Dog are doing. They're going to try and make me care about her, to make me conflicted, to make me question my intentions as Ellie, to make me see both sides of this conflict and make me sympathize with the person who, for understandable reasons, I kind of hate right now. And you're kind of reluctant. You don't want to. You're kind of like, no, she killed Joe. I'm not happy about this. And you feel kind of awkward, like being in her shoes for such a long time. And it does take a while. Like, it's not like you instantly start liking her as soon as there's a couple of encounters. Like, there's a long time where you feel kind of disconnected from her, and you feel kind of disconnected from what you're doing. And it's actually, I think it's the end of her first day where she ends up back with Owen, and they have kind of a a raunchy enough sex scene that I censored it on YouTube. But during that first day, she gets into a lot of trouble where she ends up essentially being helped by two of the people from the rival faction, which is the Scars, as they call them, the sort of more religious cult zealot kind of people. And it's basically, the character of Lev is trans. It's something we sort of find this out more gradually as the game goes on, but him and his sister are on the run because him being trans is kind of against their whole thing. They're against their rules and whatever. So they're kind of after them. So they kind of end up teaming up with Abby, and Abby leaves them out in sort of a relatively kind of safe area, but not really. And it's after she has her night with Owen that she decides to go back for them. And it's one of those moments where you can't help but like her a little bit because she's making the hero's choice. Because this is the thing, Abby, from this, everything we hear about Abby from the other characters around her, is it sounds like she's a lot like Joel. This is the really, almost dramatic irony of it all, is that in becoming someone to take on Joel, they talk about how she's the biggest Scar killer. She's killed Scar children. She's done all these bad things. And it's almost like now that the revenge is out of her system, she's really starting to reflect. And she had a relationship with Owen at one point, and now it's gone. He's with Mel. And part of that is the obsession. Part of that is because she was so consumed by this hate. And she goes back for these two kids, and you spend up most of your time with Lev because you end up having to save his sister because she gets injured, and you're going out for supplies, and all these sections, like, you gradually build up a camaraderie between them, and you start to essentially do a similar thing to Joel and Ellie. And I don't think it works to the same extent. Because of that starting point, where you kind of hate her for killing Joel, it never gets to the same point as Joel and Ellie. It's always a little bit conflicting, but it gets more complex how you feel about her over the course of the game. Where she sees that the people on this other side of this conflict herself, she sees that they're not all just these faceless zealots. They're people, and they're people. Some of them who have believed, have been led to believe certain things, and they are dangerous because of what they believe. But it makes everything more layered. No one's just good or bad, and that's it. It's that simple. And of course, and one of my favorite things actually is that so Owen always hangs out at this aquarium. That's where he hangs out. And Owen gets into some trouble because there was a sort of incident with another member of the Wolves, which is the faction that they're all a part of. He gets into trouble, and the main bad guy, played by Jeffrey Wright, or I say main bad guy, the leader, the Wolf leader, he wants to have a word with them, and he's probably going to kill him because they have a pretty strict no tolerance and all these things. And he's going to go flee, and he hangs at this aquarium. He's fixing up this boat, and we hear at some point that Abby might be at the aquarium when we're playing as Ellie. And so the end of Ellie's section, before she gets back to the small bit of the theater which leads to the cliffhanger, where she kills Owen and Mel, there's this great section. And Last of Us 1 and 2 both do this a ton of times, and it's so effective, where we know someone's in a location that we're trying to get to, and the tension of getting there and the tension of like the journey to there through the turmoil to get to that point is always so good. Last of Us does it so well. And the journey with Ellie to get to this aquarium, like the going through the rough water, sneaking in around the sort of the piers and stuff to get into because the aquarium's next to the water, and going into the aquarium, it feels like this horror. Like what is awaiting us at the end of this journey? What is awaiting of us at the end of these hallways when we get to this main room where the character we're expecting to find when she's there? Is there going to be some big boss fight? It feels like we're building up to some big fight. You feel all this adrenaline. When you get back to the aquarium, when you're playing as Abby at the end of her day 3, and you're making your way back, and because it's the end of day 3, what you're going to find as a player. You know what Ellie's done. It feels more like a sanctuary. It feels more like you're going back to somewhere safe. But you have this bittersweet feeling because you know what she's about to find. And it's that challenging element of this game that I love, that I feel is genuinely interesting and new for a video game to explore. And obviously I've played games where you have multiple characters before. A couple of Resident Evil games have that, but it's not used in a way to have some sort of big dramatic point. It's used in a fun, there's 2 different characters to play as. They have different stories. They have different guns and mechanics, and 2 different ways to play to give you some more longevity, all that stuff. But you go in and you find the horror of what's happened, and seeing it from her eyes, you realise what Ellie's done. In fact, there's a great moment early on as Abby where you see all the body bags of all the wolf members that Ellie's been killing in her part of the game. You're like, damn, we did kill a lot of people, so it kind of makes sense. And it really puts all these things into context, and you're constantly questioning it. And obviously Abby's big thing before they get back to the aquarium is when they're leaving the island, which is where all the scars live. We have this wonderful, the whole thing's on fire. It's funny because it made me feel like an old samurai movie almost, which is funny just because Ghost of Tsushima's coming out soon, and obviously that's a visual that's on my mind. But all the stuff in there is wonderful. There's so many moments where you'll be in those contextual moments where someone's grabbed you and you're having to press square to break out or punch or kick back or whatever. Which leads me to the next thing I really want to talk about, is that when you get to the sort of the cliffhanger again, and Abby's there, Jesse's dead. It looks like Tommy dies. In fact, actually, before I talk about this bit, let me just briefly mention, there's a section where you run into one of your friends as Abby, and there's a sniper. And the sniper's really really good at what he does, right? He's hitting you every time you poke your head out. You're having to stay behind cars and find sneaky places to hide so you can get up close to him. And it's this big odyssey from back to the bottom of the street to get up to the parking lot garage and get up the thing and go to the place where you need to go. The end of that, where you find out that that's been Tommy the whole time, Joel's brother, who's also a main character in the game, is such a cool reveal, and it makes sense because earlier on in the game, it clearly shows you that he is a sniper and he's good at what he's a good sniper. So it's a wonderful, because it actually harkens back to there's a section in the first game where there's a sniper, and it's one of the tougher little sections of the first game. This was kind of like that, but different. It was a completely different twist on it, which I really really liked. But you get once you're back at the theater, right? You keep control as Abby, and you actually chase Ellie, and there's a sort of stealth section, which is pretty cool because Ellie starts using stuff that you used as Ellie. She uses the trip mines and all the other things. But when you eventually get to her, and it becomes kind of they're punching each other, and you're just doing the dodging and hitting back. There's a point in that section there where it goes into more of a QTE kind of thing, where you have Ellie by the throat, and you're mashing square or you're pressing square to choke Ellie. And I don't know if I've ever felt as conflicted where I'm like, I don't want to press the button. I don't want to hurt Ellie. A video game has never, I don't know if a video game's ever made me feel that before, where I don't want to press the button to that extent, where because I'm emotionally too attached to the thing that it wants me to kill. It's wonderful use of gameplay in a narrative to make me feel a certain way. And if your argument to that is that it's manipulative, of course it's manipulative. All storytelling is manipulative. That's the whole point of storytelling. Manipulation is the point of storytelling. Just because it's good and it's not doing the same old thing doesn't mean it's unfair. It means that they're actually trying something new and arguably are achieving more because of it. It's wonderful. And there's a similar thing that kind of comes up again at the end, because after this, because Abby leaves her alive, because she chooses not to kill her because she's already got to a point. And this is after a really brutal part here where she smashes Dina's face, because at this point we know Dina's pregnant, and she smashes Dina's face into the ground, and it's super brutal. But the final section of the game, which I thought the game was ending because we were at a farmhouse with Ellie after all this, and Abby just ended the scene with saying, I want to see you again. If I ever see you again, I will kill you. We go to this farmhouse, and it's Ellie and Dina with the new baby. It's whatever, how many months later, and they're having a happy life, and it's this American dream, idyllic, as much as you can have in a post-apocalyptic world, and they're so happy. And Ellie's got PTSD. Tommy wants to go after it again because he survived, and he's got a limp, and he can barely do anything, but he wants revenge still. And Ellie, it's that wonderful thing where Ellie, in the middle of the night, gets dressed and is going to leave because she has to go and get, because Tommy had the location where she might be, and she's going to go and try her best. And Dina's begging her not to go. That you have to let this go. You can't let this consume you. And I think as the player, at least I was basically in my head begging Ellie not to do this. No, stay, have the happy ending. Do not do this. And we actually cut to Abby again, and Abby is with Lev, and they end up getting kidnapped by these slavers who kidnap people and force them to be slaves basically. And then you cut back to Ellie, and I was like, oh, is the end of this game going to be that as Ellie we end up saving Abby, and there's kind of a mutual maybe respect, or at least an understanding that this is over, that we're not going to continue this cycle of revenge. And there's a great section of getting up to that point, and when you find Abby, you find out it's actually months later, and she's lost so much weight, her hair's been cut, she's and she just wants to leave with Lev. And Ellie's like, I can't let you do this. And we have this fight in the sort of the water on the beach, and it's brutal. And there's this point where you're fighting between the two of them, and you want to not fight anymore, but that's what the game's telling you to do. You have to do it. You have to punch, and you have to strangle, and you have to dodge and kick. And there's a point where you're strangling, and you're probably about to kill Abby, and you really don't want to do it. And there's even points where because you're still playing as Ellie at this point. And again, this is what I'm talking about, where you don't want to do the thing that the character or the game is expecting you to do, but you're kind of forced into it. You feel conflicted, but there's also a point here where you're like, wait, who am I actually pressing square for here? Am I pressing square for Ellie to hit, or for Abby to hit back? It makes you conflicted. It's which one am I actually controlling right now? And I'm pretty sure it's Ellie the whole time, but the fact that I even for a second thought, are they tricking me here? Who am I pressing this button for? Is kind of masterful. It's wonderful, and ultimately Ellie can't do it. She can't kill her. But before the fight ends, though, Abby, in fighting back, bites off two of Ellie's fingers, and this becomes a really great, poignant, kind of bittersweet moment at the end, because when Ellie goes back to the farmhouse and it's cleared out, Dina's not there anymore. She's left with the baby. She's lost her family. She goes up to one of the big things throughout the game that I've not even mentioned is that she keeps playing guitar. A lot of the flashbacks make it clear that Joel taught her how to play guitar, and she loves playing guitar. She loves singing. You do it multiple times throughout the game, and it's the one thing that Joel taught her that wasn't associated with killing, because Joel taught her how to kill clickers and people and defend herself. And while in the world they're in, that's all obviously all very good and useful, but in terms of innocent things, in terms of just beautiful, innocent things, the one thing he taught her to do is play guitar, and she loved playing guitar. And she goes to play guitar at the end of the game, and she's missing, her pinky and her ring finger, and she can't, when you strum the chord, it just sounds, it's off. It's not, she's not holding enough strings, so it just sounds iffy, and she can't do it anymore. Now it is true that if your strumming hand loses a couple of fingers, you can still get by. But it's not her hand that she holds things down with. I mean, she can't play it anymore. So so she's lost everything. She lost so much. She lost Jesse, right? She lost so much by going out there to get revenge the first time, and then she couldn't let it go. And then this time she lost both her family and even the one thing that Joel taught her how to do, that was just purely innocent and beautiful. She can't even do it anymore. She's lost everything. And we end in this poignant moment of her walking off, and the camera's kind of sitting on the guitar, and it's this beautiful, depressing ending. But it's so different from the end of the first one, because the ending had that kind of snap ending. This was more of a quiet, introspective ending, and I like that they weren't just trying to repeat the beats of the first game. Because there were so many moments towards the end of the game where I thought it was going to cut to black and just be like, "Damn, it's the ending," and it didn't. It didn't do that. It did the slow, melancholic, kind of sad thing. So, I love the ending. I love it in a really sad way because it's a sad story. It's a tragedy. They said in the marketing that this game's about hate and revenge and the cycle of fate, and it truly is about the cycle of fate. And it's not even just Ellie. Abby lost everything. She gained Lev as essentially a new family member, but like Owen, who was wanting to run away with her before he died, Mel, all of her friends in the city, they all get killed by Ellie. She lost everything. Her quest for vengeance on Joel came back to take her just about everything in her life. Ellie's lost everything in her life. Tommy has lost everything in her life because he mentions that his wife doesn't even want to be with him anymore. He can barely walk. He's lost everything, and he's still consumed by this hate and this vengeance. And there's that scene between Ellie and Joel. There's a flashback right at the end of the game before the ending, where we see the night before his death, their last ever conversation is actually kind of a sweet moment where she says that she isn't ready to forgive him, but she wants to try. She wants to start to try and forgive him and move beyond what he did. And they're both kind of tearing up, as they're saying this, and it's this really like bittersweet, but you're kind of happy that there was at least something happy with them right before the end, because the relationship was so strained before that ending. So no, I think it's a wonderful story that makes you hate a character, really puts you on this path of revenge, makes you feel everything that character is going through, and then it flips it and says it's not that simple. In fact, if anything, the other thing I compare it to almost is Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which is also about revenge, obviously, but the same way that movie is like one protagonist and then it flips to the second protagonist to show you the other side of the vengeance, and it's this cycle, it just leads to more violence and more hate, and it's eventually someone has to draw a line and say, no, it ends here. I'm not going to let this continue. And there's so many moments in this game where you want them to make that choice, and Ellie does ultimately make that choice in a way, and can't go through with it, but she does it so late that she has done it after everything's lost. She's lost everything and she's alone. And if there's a Last of Us 3, man, I really hope it's about forgiveness. I really hope it's about redemption, or just finding your place and being happy or something. I hope it's just something less nihilistic than this. But I think that is my my general thought. As far as like scoring it, as far as like talking about the overall quality of the game, I love playing it. The pacing is a little bit wonky in the way it kind of goes, but it's not interesting in having a 3-act structure. It does a completely different thing with it. It's sort of thing where I think the pacing will work even better, like on a replay, because you'll know kind of how it's broken up, as opposed to the first time where you're not really sure when it's wrapping up or not. But no, I love the gameplay in the first one. A lot of people at the time used to say, "Oh, the story's great in Last of Us, but the gameplay's not good." I always loved playing Last of Us. I love the way the stealth works in it. I love the finding key items, the limited resources, cracking the safes, finding the codes and the files and all that jazz. I love all that stuff. So as far as rating it, like the first game I gave a 10. And it's something where I'm not going to give this a 10, at least now. It might become a 10 over time. It's just doing wonderful things, and it's making me feel things that, I never associated games with telling me great stories. There was a long time when a video game story was just kind of there to serve the game. It was just there to be like the wraparound that makes the game work. But I never really got invested in what it actually was doing in terms of story. And I think Naughty Dog in a big way are kind of what convinced me, hey, games actually can be art. Like they can be, and they're not the only ones that have done that now. Game stories in general, writing in games has improved so much since like the PS1 and PS2 days. The one PS2 example I would probably give is not Last of Us, Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is actually a really great story with lots of layers. I never went. I went back and played that a little bit later, though I didn't play that when it came out. But I think through the 360 PS3 generation, we kind of really started to see some games like have good stories. I think Mass Effect isn't as good as the Naughty Dog stuff, but it did start to kind of like it was getting better than other games, and we're at a point now where we have CG Project Red doing like amazing writing. We have all sorts of developers doing wonderful stuff. So that is that. So from a rating, 9.5. So 9.5. It's just shy of perfect. Just shy of perfect. And to be honest, as I replay it, because it's got New Game Plus, it's got harder difficulties. Maybe I will just end up giving it a 10 at some point. But it's getting kind of silly now with Naughty Dog, because Uncharted 4 was also like a 9.5 because it was, and it's such a different thing as well. But even that game made me feel so many things. There's moments in that game where I'm worried that Nate and Elena's marriage won't work out, and I'm really upset about it, and it pains me. And I'm like, no, I care too much about these characters, and the fact that a game makes me feel that way is exceptional. So I look forward to whatever Naughty Dog does next. Well, it's Last of Us 3, a new IP, whatever it is. Good. And for the record, just in case anyone wants to bring this up, no, this does not necessarily mean I'm not saying that companies should be crunching like Naughty Dog do, or like other devs obviously do as well. If it's a really weird, twisty, double-edged sword in a lot of ways, because I feel like game development takes so long now. Like, games since the start of the PS4, Xbox One generation, feel like they're taking like 5-6 years to make, and it feels so long. And so it's kind of scary to say, no, take more time, take another year on every game, so you don't have to crunch and kill your employees the way that game developers do. But so I'm not, I do think they should change that stuff behind the scenes. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the finished product. And those people worked on this finished product, and I don't think there's any benefit of clouding the quality of work that they did do by bringing that into the discussion of the game's quality itself. I think that's a separate discussion, which is definitely worth having. Probably not by me, admittedly. I don't know. I don't think I know the games industry well enough to have big talking points on it. But I will say, yes. It's not something I'm ignoring. It's really just what I mean to say. But yeah. Yeah, and if you have a problem with this game because there's gay characters, because there's trans characters, because of whatever, then basically F you. I don't care about your opinion. So that is it. That is me. That is Last of Us Part 2. Thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Every so often maybe I'll do a new game story. But yeah, there you go. That is it. So thank you once again for watching or listening. You can get me on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support the content and everything we do. If you did enjoy me talking about a game like this, maybe I'll do it every so often when I do play a game all the way through that's relatively new and fresh. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. Like and subscribe, all the usual stuff. Get us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates. You get me on Twitter at Wibble89. But that is me. So thank you. I will see you next time. Keep playing video games, I guess. And goodbye.